Let's go back to the breaking news we began the hour with, the arrest of former chairman of Trump's 2017 inaugural fund, Thomas Barrack. Joining us now, NBC News investigative reporter Tom Winter. So let's start with exactly what we know, what these charges are, and how serious they are.
Basically, at the heart of the matter, Chris, is that this was an effort, according to federal prosecutors, Thomas Barrack, to work on behalf of the government of the United Arab Emirates, represent them, and then not file the appropriate things he would need to file to do that. You could say it's lobbying, although this is a pretty direct effort and goes a little bit further than what we've seen other people that have been charged with, Farah, in that he directly communicated to the White House. I'll give you an example of that. According to the indictment, on or about September 22nd of 2017, Barrack met with one of the Emirati officials who's charged in this case, Chris. After that meeting, on September 25th, Tom Barrack, through his assistant, sent an email to the executive assistant to the president, President Trump, requesting to speak with them as he had, quote, something very important to share about the Middle East. So this was an effort to directly lobby the president of the United States. You know, one thing that I tend to do, Chris, when we go through these indictments, whenever somebody's charged with making false statements to the FBI, and in this instance, Tom Barrack is charged with several counts of doing exactly that, is to see what they say, that some of the things that he lied about. One of the interesting things that apparently he lied about is that back in 2016, in the summer during the campaign, as you remember, this would have been just coming out of the RNC, Barrack apparently received a separate telephone, separate cell phone, as well as an encrypted messaging app, so he could have this kind of a backdoor or private communication with the Emiratis. The FBI here quotes some text messages back and forth. So apparently it wasn't that private. But apparently they had this messaging system back and forth. He also lied to them on several occasions about what he was doing, including fictitious and fraudulent statements and representations to the FBI that after the 2016 presidential election, Barrack had no role in facilitating communications between President-elect and officials from the United Emirates, including the two officials that were charged here, as well as some ongoing communications that continued into the fall of 2017. So this wasn't just while Barrack was working with the Trump campaign or through his time in the inaugural, but in fact continued well into the Trump presidency. So a couple of interesting things there. We do anticipate, and we have been told to expect a court appearance by Barrack in Los Angeles later this afternoon. We don't expect it to be a significant appearance at this point. In other words, we're not going to hear an awful lot because he's going to be extradited at some point to New York. The charges are out of the United States Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York, which is in Brooklyn. So at some point there'll be more substantial court proceedings there. But he will have a first appearance this afternoon, and presumably the others charged in this case will have those as well. Barrack, according to our colleague Andrew Blankstein, was arrested this morning in the Los Angeles area. That's where he had his business in Colony Capital, which was, and as Pete Williams reported, part of his substantial background and history with the president, their common ties in the real estate world, or common interests, I should say. Chris?
Tom, thank you so much for that. Joining us now, Ari Melber, the host of The Beat with Ari Melber. So good to see you. This is the latest in a long line of people who are tied to Donald Trump, who have faced charges. Help us to understand this. How big a deal is it? How much trouble is Tom Barrack potentially in?
He's in a huge amount of trouble. These are significant charges. And as we've been reporting from when you first were covering this as brand new breaking news earlier this hour, this is a double shot. It is foreign lobbying violations. That can be a serious crime. We saw that come up first in the Mueller probe, a somewhat obscure law that has got some very high-level people in trouble. And then two, the alleged lying, false statements, and obstruction of justice. And so this is a speaking indictment. It has extensive detail, and it paints a picture, and the defendant will have a chance to tell his side of the story, but it paints a picture of someone who really operated like he was above the law, who thought he was getting away with things, who was hiding things, and then, according to authorities, who lied repeatedly in his interview with counsel, with a lawyer present, to try to continue what they say was the obstruction scheme of this foreign influence campaign. If they can make those charges stick in court, then you have the prospect of a jury looking at this very rich billionaire-type Trump defendant who really, according to authorities, acted the whole time, even when in an interview, like he was above the law.
Let's just remind folks who maybe weren't with us at the top of the hour the relationship that he has with Donald Trump, which is long. It goes back decades. Probably most famously, he sold the famous Plaza Hotel to Donald Trump. And then when Donald Trump decided he was going to run for president, Barrack thought, oh, this is somebody who's trying to renegotiate a contract for his TV show, but got on board when it was clear that Donald Trump was serious about being president. But when you look at Tom Barrack specifically and these charges, what kinds of questions does it raise for you, and what more might we learn?
Well, a big question is, why would someone who's so rich and well-connected at the apex of his business career take such flagrant risk? This is a financial-related crime in the sense that there are people with big moneyed interests, including a foreign government, involved. But it's not a traditional financial crime in the sense of doing it for the money. He had that. So the question is, why did he do it? Why did he continue to lie about it? What were his lawyers thinking when, according to authorities, he was sitting face to face with them and lying about things that the authorities had, because they have voluminous emails, text messages. The speaking indictment refers to things that themselves are not technically a crime, but that go towards the elements of this crime, the overt act of what they say is the lobbying. So, for example, Mr. Barrack's op-eds and of media appearances, where then he would back-channel consult with these individuals from UAE and on behalf of UAE. And so another question becomes, did you really think you were so sneaky that a so-called encrypted text or your own emails? I mean, I think people by now understand that emails can be found even between two people. So why was he acting that way? And what's his side of the story? We'll be eager to hear his defense.